on Twitch.
Welcome back to another episode of Mystery School Dropouts, where we explore the mysteries of the mind and beyond. Today we're stepping into the strange and controversial world of remote viewing, the alleged psychic phenomenon to see distant places or events without being physically present. Is it just a fringe belief, or could it be a hidden power that governments have secretly explored for decades? From Cold War spy programs to secret experiments, we're uncovering the truth behind the mysterious phenomenon. Get ready to open your mind and see beyond the ordinary as we dive into the world of remote viewing.
Excellent. All right. Good afternoon, boys.
Hello.
Episode 9, here we
Hey.
are. So, remote viewing, a very strange and rather metaphysical topic that we have today. So, to kick us off, remote viewing, what the hell is it? Short definition: remote viewing is a purported psychic ability where individuals attempt to perceive and describe a target location or event that they have not physically visited or witnessed. The viewer, in a controlled environment, tries to gather information about the target, often providing verbal descriptions or sketches. This information is later compared to the actual target to assess the accuracy of the viewing. Remote viewing has been of interest to some intelligence agencies, who explored its potential applications in gathering information. So, right off the bat, we have a very strange and I would say rather left field topic, which I guess is pretty typical for us, pretty par for the course. One thing that I find very intriguing about this one in particular was the seemingly keen interest that our wonderful government took in it at the latter half of the 20th century. The famous Stargate project that I'm sure many people have heard of was a U.S. government program that began in the late 70s. It was centered in Fort Meade, Maryland, not far from where I'm originally from, actually. And it was the purpose was to investigate psychic phenomenon, particularly remote viewing, for intelligence gathering. It was conducted jointly by the CIA, the U.S. Army, and the DIA, and it explored whether individuals could perceive distant locations and events without direct observation. Allegedly, there was some degree of success in these experiments. The degree to which is often debated, but apparently it was successful enough that the project went on for about 20-ish years before it was declassified and disbanded in 1995. So, to further open up this conversation, I guess we should back up a little bit. The term remote viewing was first coined by a couple of physicists, a couple gentlemen by the names of Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. Puthoff. They were apparently parapsychology researchers at the Stanford Research Institute. Another gentleman by the name of Ingo Swann is credited with popularizing the term as we know it today, remote viewing, in the early 70s. So that's a brief description of what we're talking about, remote viewing as a concept, and then how it has been used within the shady corners of our U.S. Government agencies. If anyone else wants to jump in and add anything to that, they're more than welcome to before we go any further.
Yes, I wanted to add one thing. So the way that the public found out about this program, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is through a Freedom of Information request that was done, and I think it was declassified in 1995.
So, my understanding, if I have it correct, based on some of the reading I was doing earlier today, was that the CIA voluntarily disclosed some of this information, at least like the existence of it, and I believe that subsequent Freedom of Information Acts provided like more context for what it was. I believe that's how it worked. I think they just voluntarily put it out there without the uh, Freedom of Information Act initially.
Okay, so
I could be mistaken about that.
there was a bit of a thread there for people to pull at and kind of know what to request. Then it sounds like.
Yeah, because based on what I was reading, it was like the CIA wanted to have a bit of a transparency initiative because I guess, I mean, for some reason they got kind of bad press over the years. So
Strange.
they so so they wanted to I don't know, come off as like, oh, we'll be open and honest with everyone. Like here's this weird thing that we did.
Okay.
So, and then as the years went on, Freedom of Information Act requests disclosed more and more documents pertaining to the experiments.
Okay, gotcha.
Kind of makes me
Yeah.
question how useful or valid this might be if they voluntarily came forward with it. You would imagine that if it's still of important use in espionage, that they would not necessarily voluntarily put that kind of information out.
Yeah,
But I'm
I
not sure.
know. I definitely hear what you're saying, and I agree with you in part. But part of what makes me scratch my head about it is like the length of the time frame that this project was being undertaken. I mean, we're talking the better part of 20 years the CIA was doing this.
Hmm.
I mean, like 2 decades. I mean, you'd think for something that rings of like woo woo would have been dispelled relatively early if it had no efficacy, right? Like you would think,
Right.
but
Well, as I think we'll maybe talk about more later, but there are quite a few studies that seem to show some statistical validity to remote viewing sessions, which would seem to indicate that there is something to it. Uh, the studies, uh, some people say that they should be questioned, but there are quite a few that do seem to indicate that there is something there. So,
yeah, which is so strange. It's so because on its face it's something you would the skeptic would just toss aside, but allegedly there were some degrees of success. And it's very peculiar, and I guess that's what we're going to try to get to the bottom of tonight. I doubt we'll definitively know, but um, do we want to talk a little bit about some of the key figures that were involved in the emergence of these practices? Would that be a good
Yeah, I think
uh,
that makes sense here.
cool?
yeah.
Who wants
So
to take a crack at that?
I can grab this one.
Okay.
So first up, as you mentioned, we have this gentleman Ingo Swann, who was an American psychic artist and author whose claims of clairvoyance were investigated as part of the Central Intelligence Agency's Stargate project. So seems like he was touting this to a level that raised him to be evaluated by the CIA, which is interesting. Um, he is very open about remote viewing and all sorts of other psychic phenomena. Um, one of his let's see, he was involved in Scientology during the 70s and attained the level of operating thetan through Scientology auditing. So, an operating thetan or thetan is a state of complete spiritual freedom in which one is a willing and knowing cause over life, thought, matter, energy, space, and time. Quite a role, quite a an accolade to
Very
have.
accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's credited with proposing the idea of coordinate remote viewing, where the remote viewer would use a reference coordinate um, to kind of focus on in order to obtain their uh, their viewing, whether it be like actually sight viewing or any other sensory phenomenon which they could gather. It basically acts as a focus object. Um, and it can be geographic coordinates, but it can also just be a string of numbers or something to tie whatever the subject of the viewing is to the viewer. Um, he reportedly was able to view the rings of Jupiter in 1973, several years before the rings were proven to exist. So, yeah, quite an interesting figure. Do you guys have any more to add on Mr. Swan?
Not a lot. I just want to make a remark that I find it so interesting how things like Scientology always seem to crop up when we're talking with about these government experiments, and people involved in seemingly like occultic practices in these agencies. Scientology seems to just appear a lot, and I just find the correlation curious.
Yeah,
Yeah, it definitely is.
yeah,
Go
it's
ahead, Adam.
interesting. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with Scientology, but they have kind of like a pseudo technological angle to it, where there's certain devices, like electronic devices, that they use to do different, like auditing and these other Scientology practices. Um, but you kind of see that here too, which during some of the experiments, I believe with Swan, they use something called like a quirk detector. I never saw a real description of how this device worked, but supposedly he was able to influence how the needle on it read, and if it was, high or low. But it seems like this was very just indicative of the times. It seems like during this time when Scientology was happening, more so than it is now. Um, there was kind of this weird pseudo technological, pseudo scientific kind of mindset, where we have these devices that do these, reportedly very like crazy things, but there's not really a great backstory given. But it just feels like it very much suits that kind of time era that this happened.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I imagine that organizations like Scientology or the Masons or these other kind of prohibitive organizations that seem to draw people who are in these spheres probably just serve like as gathering places for people who want to have a networking or community involvement with people who are powerful but might be interested in pursuing some of the less societally palatable subjects, such as things like remote viewing.
Hmm. I wonder to what extent things like you said, the Masons or Scientologists. I wonder to what extent they act as almost like funnel organizations to gaining entry to the three-letter agencies and shadowy parts of our government.
Hmm.
There
An-
definitely seems to be a big connection there.
Another thought I had too, like how crazy of a life is that, where you're like, this artist who's, supposedly a psychic, he's into Scientology, and he ends up working with the CIA of all people. It's just, it's like you would never think that would happen, but here we are.
Yeah. I mean, his name alone just carries some sort of ominous essence to it. Ingo Swan.
Mhm.
Like, you're hired.
Exactly.
Yeah. Also, another prominent figure in this realm who's also been very outspoken is a man by the name of Joe McMoneagle. Um, he is a retired U.S. Army chief warrant officer. He was among the first people recruited for the Stargate project. And he claims to have worked with intelligence agencies using remote viewing for espionage purposes. Um, he says that he was able to view strategic parts of Russia, um, and apparently, based on what he says, contributed a lot to helping the espionage field for the U.S. Um, he also claims that remote viewing is possible. Uh, it's possible to remote view the past and the future as well as the present. And I believe he also claimed that he was able to view Mars at one point. Um,
Hmm.
he talks a lot about the methodology of remote viewing. He talks about the concept of really dropping your ego and really like tuning in and focusing. Um, he says that most people are capable of this, and he trains people on this. Um, he claims to have predicted the passing of the right to work bill, um, a new religion without the emphasis of Christianity, science of the soul, a vaccine for AIDS, a movement to eliminate television, and a temporary tattoo craze that would replace the wearing of clothing, all of which were supposed to take place between 2002 and 2006. Um, some of this came to be, I believe, some did not. Um, but yeah, very interesting guy.
Hmm.
Anything else you guys want to add?
Yeah, I'd like to add. So there's this, I guess, institution. It's called the Monroe Institute, and McGonagall was actually, I guess, employed there. You know, in the later parts of his life, and this is where Brandon was talking about, where he would teach people how to remote view. But if you look up the Monroe Institute, it's a place that teaches all kinds of, quote unquote, consciousness expanding practices, whether that's remote viewing, manifestation, astral projection. It seems to really kind of market itself as the premier school to go where you can learn these things and learn techniques from people who have, supposedly proven themselves, to have these abilities. But over the years, McGonagall has made multiple media appearances. He's been on like late night shows. He's been on, I believe, a plethora of different podcasts. He has been very outspoken about this and really does not shy away from talking about it at all.
Same with Ingo Swan, right?
Yes,
He's also very
yes.
outspoken.
Hmm.
Speaking about his remote viewing of Mars, correct me if I'm wrong here, if one of you guys know. Didn't he make the somewhat outlandish claim that there is like humans living on Mars somewhere? Didn't he say something about that, or a different species of human?
I believe he did. I don't know the exact details, but he definitely had some pretty far out claims when it came to like space. I'm pretty sure, like you said, he did predict that there was some type of uh, beings there, humanoid beings. Um, he also,
Yeah.
it was either Swan or McGonagall also said that they were able to remote view the dark side of the moon and were able to
Mm.
see, like, I think, what was it, Chops? Like an alien base or something like that?
Yeah, I think he said something about a moon base being there.
Yeah.
You know, it's giving Preston Nichols a little bit, isn't it? For any viewers that listen to our episode on the Montauk Project, some of the claims of McGonagall, some of the more outlandish ones and extreme ones, are reminding me a bit of some of the claims of Preston Nichols.
Yeah, I agree. Seems to be kind of there's an archetype for these types of things. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it
you
does kind
seem
of
to
seem to be that.
encounter a lot of these people.
Yeah, but a key difference here is that Preston Nichols, I don't think was, if I recall correctly, we weren't able to prove that he had very much in the way of credentials. I think he
Right.
was in the army, or he had worked for like a defense contractor allegedly, but most, if not all, of his credentials were of dubious origin. Whereas a guy like McGonagall, you can look up. He his rap sheet for who he's worked for is long. I mean, I think he's worked for the NSA, he's worked for the CIA, he's worked for the military. Like he has a provable like laundry list of a resume.
Hmm.
So that, maybe gives him a little more credence to some of the things he's claiming than than Preston Nichols, maybe. But
Yeah, and I mean,
definitely, yeah.
yeah, and
Oh,
his
go ahead.
story very much matches up with what the CIA has released, publicly. Um,
Hmm.
so, unlike the Montauk Project, where we're never able to actually find any government response about this thing, other than them just denying it, once I think in a Navy, in like from a naval capacity, they
Yeah,
denied it
they
pretty
denied
flatly.
the
Right.
Philadelphia experiment.
Right. But this definitely, whether or not you believe that this works, or if we come to the conclusion, if we believe this works or not, it did happen. It seems very, I really have no question that this was something that they studied for quite a number of years.
Yeah,
Mhm.
its existence certainly seems pretty cut and dry. So,
Right. One more thing about McMonagall before we move on. I think it's the story of how he came to be a remote viewer for these intelligence agencies is kind of interesting. He said that he was in the military, and he kind of had this innate ability. Like he would like get the feeling that something was about to happen or something like that. And he claims that, for example, he would get a feeling about something that whatever bunker he was in was about to get hit, and he would move, and it got to the point where others would follow him around, because they started to notice a correlation with his intuition and what was actually going to happen. Um, and I guess someone approached him and asked him if he wanted to be a part of this kind of uh, Project Stargate or whatever it started out
hmm.
as. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting that he says that this is not something like he acknowledged to begin with. It was just kind of something that was innate to him.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, doesn't he claim that that certain people, according to him, have a higher proclivity to engage in these practices than others, and it somehow is bound up in one's emotional intelligence?
Yeah, that's
Apparently,
what I saw.
Hmm.
yeah. Apparently, the higher your emotional intelligence, the higher the likelihood that you could successfully practice remote viewing, which is
Hmm.
interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to add something here. I was listening to an interview. I can't remember the name of the person it was with, but it was somebody who was supposedly involved in Project Stargate and this kind of larger remote viewing thing. And they claimed that the way that they recruited a lot of the psychics was that they would go and find people who were working jobs that didn't have very long life expectancies. So think like somebody who is, a soldier, like a flamethrower out in Vietnam, like their life expectancy at that job isn't super long. It could be measured in a couple months to maybe a few years if they're lucky. But they would find people working these super dangerous jobs that were working them for like 20 years or so. And they thought that these people might have a higher chance of being psychic because they were able to, do the right things in order to stay alive in these super dangerous conditions.
Like a sixth sense type of
Exactly.
thing.
And it makes
Hmm.
sense. Like if you were trying to figure out who has a sixth sense, I mean, you could ask somebody, but are they really going to be able to give you an answer? But this seems like a pretty, a very interesting and thoughtful way to go about recruiting people. It makes a lot of sense in my mind if you were looking for
Hmm.
those kind of individuals.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, if someone has a much more natural knack for, kind of vibes or whatever, feeling like or having this sense that something might happen or can see outside of the present or anticipate events, it's going to show in the stats. So,
Hmm.
Hmm.
um okay. So, why don't we move on to how does one practice remote viewing? Do one of you want to walk through the steps?
Yeah, I will walk through the steps. Um, so I've kind of written down like exact steps here. So if any of you want to try this at any point, this is exactly how you would kind of go through the process. So the first thing we're going to do is the preparation. So first, you're gonna want to calm your mind. So the viewer typically enters a relaxed state using meditation, breathing exercises, and other methods to clear distractions and focus. The next thing is you need to remove bias. Viewers are often instructed to avoid preconceived ideas about the target, maintaining an open and receptive mindset. So you want to go into this, not believing that it's going to work, not believing that it's not going to work. You just purely want to try it. You also need a quiet environment, and this kind of plays into the meditation aspect of it. It typically takes place in a quiet environment, a controlled setting, and this is purely to limit external distractions. You want to be fully focused when you do this. The
Mm-hmm.
next step is tasking. So we have the target selection. The viewer is given a target to view, and like we were talking about earlier, this target can be assigned either like lat long geological coordinates, or they can be assigned just kind of a random string of numbers. But this is given so that the viewer can focus on something. So the target is usually unknown to the viewer and represented, like I said, by a random number or even placed into a blind envelope. This ensures that the viewer has no prior knowledge or basis that can influence the session. Um, and the target description is the next part of this tasking step. The viewer receives very minimal information about the target, if any. In some cases, they are given just a few coordinates or numbers tied to the object or location. All right. So, step 3 is session initiation. So, while doing this, the viewer sketches or writes down their immediate impressions. These are often vague in general, such as shapes, colors, textures, or movements. The goal is to record any raw data without judgment. So, you're just trying to get a general gist here, kind of a vibe, an energy. You're not really trying to like pare down into exact details at this point. During this, you want to make sure that you're accessing kind of like a free flowing information. After the initial impression, the viewer allows more details to emerge, and these could be things such as visuals, sounds, emotions, or even physical sensations. And one thing to avoid while doing this step is you want to avoid analytical overlay. So, this is when the viewer's conscious mind tries to analyze or interpret the data too early. A good example of this would be seeing something round and immediately thinking ball. The viewer is trained to note when this happens and attempt to reset their focus. So while you're taking in this information that you're receiving, you want to make sure that you don't make assumptions about what it is, and you truly try to get as much of the raw data feed out of your mind as you can and not color it in any way. So then
Mm-hmm.
after you've done that and you've gotten these, raw kind of interpretations of the feeling, you can do more detailed sketches and notes. As the session progresses, the viewer continues to gather more specific information about the target. He starts to draw and create sketches, and written descriptions are used to capture the information. Um, in some protocols, the viewer revisits the target multiple times during the session to refine their perceptions and pick up on any overlooked details. So they just kind of do multiple passes to just further refine and further gather more information. Then we get to the last part of it, which is the feedback or the post session analysis. After the session, the viewer and the monitor, if present, review the results. If the target is known, the viewer is shown what the target is and told if it was a hit or not, if he was correct or not. Um, so then you can do, follow up sessions, or sometimes done, like I said, to get further detail. And that kind of about covers the basic steps. I think the big overarching things here is you don't want to go into it, with any expectations of what you're going to see or feel. You just want to have a completely open mind. You want to get into that meditative mind state where you're just, it's kind of just pure thought, not colored or assuming anything. And you just kind of let these feelings flow through you and try to capture as much of the vague information as possible and then kind of pare down upon it. Does that sound like a decent description, or is there anything that either of you would like to add about that?
I
I'd
think you
like to
nailed
add
it.
the yeah, you did great. There's a couple little things I want to add on there. that specifically McMonagall mentioned in one of the podcasts that I listened to. One thing that he stressed when discussing practicing remote viewing is this idea of distracting the ego, which you both had touched on it. But according to McMonagall, it's impossible to properly practice remote viewing if your ego is like in the way, quote unquote. According to him, what he always did to ensure successful sessions is that he would distract or occupy his ego by conducting math equations in his head, or focusing his ego on unrelated thoughts that he needed to work out. So that it almost to me sounds like he's splitting his psyche in two, like almost like a dualistic thing, where like the ego part of him is off in a corner focusing on something completely unrelated, while I guess you would call it maybe the subconscious part of his mind is then like brought up out of the ether, if you will, and that's the part of his mind that engages in this practice. He calls it a split mental function. Um, and another thing that's really, I think, important to point out is that, according to him, but I don't think this would be exclusive to him. I think this is generally agreed upon. The idea of remote viewing is not limited to like sight, right? So viewing in this context is like a bit of a misnomer because the process apparently actually involves utilizing all of our human senses. So like the sound of the area, the feeling on your skin of the atmosphere of where you're standing, whether it's windy or hot or cold or raining, or if there's an air conditioner running or whatever, you get the idea. Um, like how it smells in the area, and also like what you're emotionally, how the area feels to you. All of these aspects encompass remote viewing. So it's not simply sight. It's literally like a full human sensation input experience, which is pretty interesting. Um, but yeah, I would say that you summed it up really well. Um, is there anything you wanted to add, Brandon?
Nope. I think that covers it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so let's try it.
Okay. So we have derived a simple experiment here that we're going to do on Mystery School Dropouts tonight. And I encourage any of the viewers to do the same if you're listening to the podcast. It doesn't have to be currently, it can be in the future. We're going to give Brandon and the viewers and listeners a target number. And we had Chops go out to a location today and pick a subject and environment, take pictures of it, and really try to observe it with a open mind. And we are going to go ahead and let Brandon live here try to remote view what Chops saw, and we will then let Chops tell us if there are any accuracies or what the inaccuracies are to really kind of give this thing a fair shake. I think we're all going into it with a very open mind. The statistics make us believe that it may be possible, um, and we want to really give it a fair try. So we're going to conduct that experiment now. During the, if you listen to this on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever, I may edit this section. It may take a little bit. So if Brandon just responds right away, don't think that's what actually happened. We're going to give him some time, and I may edit it down for everyone.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think we should go ahead and try the experiment. I can read out the target number for
So
everyone.
before you do that, I just want
Yes.
to give a little disclaimer. I have been researching this, but I am fully intending to attempt this with a completely open mind. I will be utilizing what I know from mindfulness and meditation practice to try and clear my mind of any distracting thought. And I will just, with the most open sense, describe what comes to me with as little ego involvement or bias as possible. So I just wanted to let that be known.
Okay, and like I said, Brandon has no idea about the location or any of this. Neither do I. Chops is the only one who has any of the information, so we shall see where this goes. Are you ready for the target, Brandon?
Yes.
Okay. The target is target 7784 3692. One more time, that is target 7784 3692.
Okay. Um so I mean, I just went with the first things that I felt or experienced, or came to my mind.
Okay.
Um The first thing
So
that I
curious.
have the first thing that I have written down is must, like a musty kind of smell. Uh, the color green, like, I don't know, like a specifically, like, subdued kind of shade of green. Uh, wood, uh, window, sun. What is this one? I don't know what this one says. Uh, long black hair, creaking floor, gray shirt. Um, and then kind of the overall image that kept coming back to me was like this kind of like uh what seems like a sort of like deli or a small cafe maybe with like small round tables and a tall girl with long black hair. That's yeah. And then I don't know if you can see I drew a little
Hmm.
so yeah, that's that's what I got.
Okay. So Chops, what are we dealing with here?
Okay. So before I divulge the series of images that I captured of the location I went to, um, I want to say that certain elements of what you described were accurate in a vague sense. Certain elements. Now, we're all just diving into this. It's definitely an experiment. We're just diving into this blind. I wonder if you would want to try it again, or do you want to? Because I know that part of this, if I remember correctly from the outline of how to perform a remote viewing, sometimes the viewer is given several opportunities to try to view it again. Um, do we want to do it a second time? No, I don't want to divulge anything more. Uh, before we come to a decision on this, but I'm putting it out there. If you want to like take it, I don't want to put any bias
Mhm.
out there on what you may have gotten accurately and what you may have not gotten
Right.
accurately.
We can
Um,
try.
yeah,
It couldn't hurt, right?
I
I
know,
guess.
and we're just doing this on the fly, of course, for our viewers. I and again, I want to stress that I don't want to impart any sort of bias on like you got this right, you got this wrong
Mhm,
before I reveal what it is that the images that I captured.
mhm.
But my thinking, and again, Alex, you can certainly edit out the long periods of
Sure.
silence, so this won't be a burden for the viewers. But I actually think it might be a wise idea to try to go into a meditative state one more time and see on the second attempt what you get. If you get similar things, if
Mhm.
different things come into your mind, how do you feel about that? About doing that one more time?
Let's try it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you so I'm gonna give me like 1 second to kind of uh clear my mind and then can you in like 60 seconds can you read the number again for me?
Sure, you could read it this time, Chops.
Sure. So I'll give you a minute before I read it out.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Target number 77843692. Again, 77843692.
Okay. So I'm just gonna read the things that I wrote down. Uh, some of it might not make much sense. It's just what was coming to me. Uh, Craggy lines, whatever that means. Um, Once again, this like musty aroma and this deep green. feeling small, damp or wet, vertical lines, long black hair, crunchy, creaking, relaxed, hold touch.
Interesting. Before we before I reveal what I took pictures of today, I'm curious to hear what your process was for, because you have a degree of familiarity with meditation. You practice it regularly, do you not?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
or before I divulge what it is that I took pictures of, or
Mhm.
would you be able to briefly explain like what you did to get into the state you were in?
Yeah, sure. So, as with any like mindfulness or meditation that I practice, the first step is to just relax your body. Um, to just focus on scanning down the entirety of yourself and just noticing any tension and releasing it. And then kind of focusing on the breath always helps me. So there's in the attempt to like clear the stream of internal monologue or thought, um, is to really focus your attention completely on the sensations related to breathing. So the feeling of moving your stomach in and out as your lungs expand and uh, go out, and that kind of helps aim your like flashlight of attention at something, and to just let that happen. And then as you focus more and more, um, this inner voice kind of quiets, and you just kind of, I attempt to attain like just absolute awareness, um, to just let all of the sensations around me, to feel my body in the chair, to notice any ambient sound around me as just things that are appearing, and just be calm. And so that is kind of the same practice that I used for this, is to just focus on clearing the mind, focus on uh, my body and space, and then to focus on the numbers, and then just notice anything that immediately was popping up in my consciousness as it did.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. So, the subject that I chose, uh, there are elements of it that fit the descriptions that you gave on both sessions, and other ones that do not
Mhm.
fit the description. So, for anyone viewing my stream, I have a photo of what the subject is up right now. So today I went to Golden Gate Park, and in Golden Gate Park there is a road called JFK, the JFK Promenade. It used to be open to vehicles, but it's now closed to vehicles. It's only open to foot traffic, bicycles, and scooters. And it's a very lovely stroll through the park, several miles. And along the road, there are several art pieces. And I chose as my subject for today this statue that is colloquially known as Rabbit Woman and Dog Man. And as the names imply, they're like these humanoid figures. One is of a woman with a rabbit's head, and the other is a man with a dog's head. They're wearing business attire, and they are holding hands. The dog man's carrying a briefcase of some sort, and they are the statue is of them walking mid-stride. And the background is green because we're in Golden Gate Park in this picture. You said something about craggy or cracks, something like that, on your
Yeah,
second session.
craggy and yeah.
Now, I don't know if that would relate in any way to the condition of the road, because in the photograph there are several cracks in the road. Um, uh, so at the end of the day, I don't think it was particularly accurate.
Mhm.
But I guess that means you have low emotional intelligence, brother. But
Well, we all knew that.
yeah, just kidding, just kidding. Obviously, this is a one-off experiment. None of us, if I'm not mistaken, have ever attempted anything like this before. But for some reason this morning, there's so many options where I live here in San Francisco of like a potential subject, and for some reason, this really peculiar statue, which I would describe as rather Lynchian, it has a very almost off-putting presence. I've scootered and bicycled past it at night, and it is rather eerie to come upon when there is not a soul in Golden Gate Park at like 1 a.m. and you're just biking past this rabbit woman dog man combo. It definitely feels like something out of a David Lynch movie. But that is what I chose. So ultimately, I would not say that what you envisioned lined up with what I took, but obviously this was a one-off experiment we've never done before, and it was interesting to see what you came up with. Obviously, this does not prove or disprove anything with regards to remote viewing. As we stated earlier in the podcast, different people have, theoretically speaking, different proclivities, levels of like ability to engage in this practice. And for those who maybe do have the ability to do this kind of thing, it takes a lot of work. According to and there's, your mileage may vary as to, even if you are quote unquote good at remote viewing, very often inaccuracies or complete misses will pop up. So, this is just a fun one-off thing that we tried to do. I was really hoping you were gonna say rabbit ears. I would have freaked the fuck out. Like, I really would have, man.
I could feel the tension when he, like, during the first pass. I was like, I could feel it, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
I was like
yeah.
so excited for him to just nail it out of the park.
It's like, I'm seeing a woman with rabbit ears. That would have genuinely creeped me out, man. Be like,
yeah.
like what I say earlier, like, CIA has entered the chat. Like, uh,
Huh.
but no, that's interesting. So, I mean, look, I mean, certain vague elements of it sounded vaguely accurate, right? Like green, the feeling of being small. Golden Gate Park's pretty big. I guess you could equate that to some degree of
No musty smell.
accuracy. No, nothing like that. It's very fresh.
Okay.
I was smelling cut grass, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I was smelling cut grass when I was riding around there. So nothing musty, nothing like a deli, nothing like that.
Yeah.
I have a series of pictures. I took, like I said, like 7 or 8 of them. And maybe I should look through here and see if any of them captured a girl with long dark hair, but again, if you'd said a girl with rabbit ears, that would have been it. Oh man. You might have a new job in your midst if that were the case. Yeah, I don't see in any of the pictures that I'm looking through right now, I don't see any discernible girl with black hair. But hey, this is just a little fun experiment.
You were a block off, man.
Damn it.
Yeah, you were the next block down.
And to be clear to our listeners, the stream of numbers that we fed Brandon were completely random, just from the ether of my mind. The numbers just manifested in relation to this for some reason, and those were the numbers I went with. It's not connected to anything consciously tangible with the statue or with Golden Gate Park or anything like that. It was just a random 8-digit number that I came up with, which apparently is valid.
Yeah, that
according
is
to
valid. Maybe in the future we should try to give him some lat launch chords.
I
I mean,
know.
I
I
don't think
was
we're prepared
thinking
for
about
tonight, but I think maybe that's worth trying just on our
I
own
don't know.
sometime.
I'm pretty good at GeoGuessr, so
it.
Ugh.
so I just want to talk about my experience with this.
Yeah.
Sure,
Um
please.
so it was interesting because I did feel like I was actually there was like there were specific things that were definitely like I felt like fixated on. Um,
Hmm.
like just kind of like general sensations. Um, like in the second time, like this like kind of like feeling of like touching something cold was definitely like I don't know, it just like felt very natural. Like I don't know, it just like I felt like it came to me and it like stuck. And same with like in the first session, this kind of like I just kept seeing this like one very specific like I could if I sat here and drew it out, like I could probably draw it in like pretty good detail. And I tried a rudimentary sketch. Um, but yeah, it was an interesting experience to, cuz like I said, it seemed like something was there.
Hmm.
Um And, I mean, I don't know if I would put it down to something that's happening in like a paranormal sense. It's probably just, things that are coming from my subconscious or what have you. But yeah, interesting experience. I mean, getting into the meditative mindset is always nice, so that was cool.
Mhm. Mhm. Did you find it difficult or rather seamless to do during the stream? Was that hard at all, or was it easy to just quiet the mind?
Yeah, I thought that aspect was fine. I
Mm.
mean, I've been doing this for a long time and I would say in some form practice it almost daily. Um,
Mhm.
so that aspect is at this point I'm pretty used to it. Um, and the whole point is, despite where you are and what's going on, is to find that like centering place and to focus your attention on um your experience and with the, intent to cut the stream of thought. So, yeah, I felt like that was fine.
I have a question for you, just
Mhm,
from like a meditative practice perspective. So, before you had done it, you had mentioned like wanting to clear your mind. So
mhm.
this, remote viewing specifically, you very much like aren't trying to clear your mind, or like you're trying to keep it open. But did it feel different than doing normal meditation for you, like allowing these thoughts to happen? Does that make any
Uh,
sense?
I don't know. I wouldn't say so. I would
Okay.
say that like my like trying to grab onto the stuff that naturally pops up is definitely something that I don't normally do.
Okay. Or and
Um,
draw during during meditation as well, right?
right, right.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, but yeah, no, I think it felt pretty similar. I think yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
it may be with more practice or what have you. I honestly I don't know if that would make a difference. Um,
We could do a mystery school dropout sideshow where like every episode we like at the end as a little bonus we each we each do a remote viewing. We each take a picture of something and then we
I
go around.
Or I really like
like
the
it.
idea of the coordinates. I
Mhm.
think,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I think
just
the
I
coordinates would be interesting.
yeah, regardless of like how much scientific data there is on this, there's something in my mind that like giving somebody coordinates just feels a lot better and more likely to work than a random number. But
Mhm.
while doing researching this, I think, what I found is one of the reasons that this program shut down is because they were never able to really figure out why it worked. When you look at something from a scientific perspective, it's important to understand the variables and why something is happening. And while they're getting, some statistic anomalies here, it seems like there may actually be something here. You're really not able to figure out the mode of operation. So that makes it hard to practice, hard to get better at. You're kind of just, for lack of a better phrase here, taking shots in the dark at how you actually improve. Right? It seems like a
Hmm.
very individual thing at that
And
point.
it would probably
Right.
become harder to justify funding it over time if you can't establish like a clearly defined set of parameters to get results with, right?
Right. At that point, it's purely a capability that some individuals seem to possess, but not one that you can ever teach anybody or grow in any type of military way. You can't like train soldiers to start doing this because you just don't know how it works.
Hmm.
Right.
So yeah, that
Worth
makes it difficult, but
worth noting that like who
I
knows,
don't.
they could still be practicing it for all we know, right? Like, well,
Right.
CIA is a bit of a black box, right? Like who knows?
I don't know if one of you all want to try right now, but I have some coordinates with a photo of something.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I actually have handy dandy clipboard right here with a pencil.
Should we try another one just to see?
I mean, why not, right?
do
I
we
mean,
just go
I
around
don't.
the circle and all try it and see who
Yeah,
does
We
I mean,
better?
can, yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
I'm
see.
down.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
someone has a gift among
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
all right. I mean, I got literally a blank sheet of paper right here.
Okay.
Um, this is completely impromptu. We didn't, again, for our listeners, didn't plan on doing any more of these. So
Yeah.
this is very much an impromptu thing.
And this is
Um,
a completely random photo that these I did not know. I did not have any intention beforehand, and these guys have no idea. And I am turning my phone so there's no reflection in my sunglasses. So yeah. Whenever you're ready. I don't know if you want a few minutes.
yeah, let me. So I don't practice meditation. I probably should, but I can give it a crack and see what happens. I will. Give me a minute. I'll give you like a I'll verbalize it, let you know when I'm ready to go.
Mhm.
So before we start though, are you going to be reading out like a coordinate? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I have actual coordinates.
Okay. So give me a minute here. I'm going to start trying to power down my ego, and then I'll just say go in a minute. So.
All right.
Go.
The coordinates are 40.7470718, comma, negative 74.0066786. Once again, that is 40.7470718, comma, negative 74.0066786.
Okay. So here's what I came up with.
Mhm.
I, for some reason, was perceiving something blue, like a blue structure, perhaps a building. For some reason, I was it. I was imagining that it was cold, maybe a little windy. I saw steps, like a series of stairs. Um, I wrote down like rustling leaves. I don't know if there were some trees around that were maybe it was autumnal. So essentially, the overall picture I was getting was of a blue building with several steps leading up to like the entrance, 3 or 4 stories tall, a cold autumnal day, people speaking in the background. I don't know if this was like an outdoor like in a location where like not necessarily a busy street where people having conversations as they pass by. Uh, that's what I have. How how utterly wrong was that?
So, uh, you want me to just go into it? Do you want to do a second attempt or no?
Hmm. Should I do a second attempt? I don't know. For the sake of brevity, let's just stick with the one.
Okay. Uh, so, uh, I would say you really didn't hit anything.
Okay.
The image I have is of a painting, uh, at the Paula Gladstone Gallery on West 21st Street. It depicts a marble statue, uh, of someone with angel wings, over somebody who is laying in their arms. The tone of the painting is kind of warm. It's like a lot of yellow. The building itself is on street level. There are no stairs. It's a gray um, building.
Do you have
Um,
the name of the painting?
I do not. I
Mm,
do
okay.
not.
All right.
But I will send it to you.
You know what's funny about this is when you first started reading out the numbers,
Uh-huh.
um, and there's no way for me to prove this. Obviously, this is just I'm just speaking what I experienced. But for like a second or two, I envisioned myself in an art gallery, but then it shifted to outside, and I went with
Hmm.
that. But my first initial like 2 second vision was of an art gallery, not necessarily a painting,
Right.
but was an art gallery. But then, as you kept reading the numbers, my I don't know if calling it a vision might be a stretch, but whatever was popping up into my mind, switched to somewhere outside. So
Hmm.
definitely a miss, but interesting
Yeah,
nonetheless.
interesting,
Yeah, that
interesting.
is interesting.
Look at that. Wow. Huh.
Yeah, also I should mention that the day that I took this photo, it was quite nice out and quite warm,
Mm.
and there are no trees around there. There.
One thing I will
Mhm.
say, having just tried this one time, um, it's difficult to sever my. I guess this is part of the ego problem.
Mhm.
Severing my perception of who you are and where you live.
Mhm.
Um, I couldn't shake my mind. I found it very difficult to attempt to remove the notion that this was somewhere in New York City.
Right. Right.
And I think that certainly plays a part in
Right.
in warping whatever potential uh this has.
Mhm.
You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
would imagine that is something that is a part of this. And we'll go into later as to our speculations about it maybe or um, whatnot. But um, I would imagine that that has something to do with this phenomena. But I don't know.
I think it's a case by case basis, maybe. But yeah, I'm gonna just throw that away. Interesting though. Okay.
Mhm.
Should I give it a try?
Let's do it.
Yeah,
Uh,
so now,
Chops.
yeah, Chop should probably do it, and it better not
Mhm.
be Glacier National Park.
I
Truly try to be random here.
will. Give me a moment while I have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pictures in my
Okay.
uh
So just so you know, how I generated the coordinates for that location was to check the photo in my phone and then go to the metadata, the details, to see the location, and then use Google Maps to drop a pin there and give a coordinate.
okay. Give me 1 minute here. I want to find
Sure.
something truly random so that there's uh
The more you look, the less random it gets, man.
okay. Let's see here. Okay, I've found a picture. And how did you find the coordinates for this again on yours?
So, like I said, I checked the metadata of the photo. So if it's on your phone, you should be able to view uh, an approximate location or an exact location if it was at somewhere that's in on maps. Um, and then use Google Maps. Uh, if it has coordinate data, you can just use that. But if it's a specific location, you can use Google Maps to drop a pin, and it will generate coordinates for that location.
Yeah, if you just want to give me the
Okay.
address, this could be a lot easier.
Yeah, so don't don't look at my stream for the sake of I'm pulling up some things right now.
Roger that. I
Okay.
am not looking at your stream.
Okay.
I
Just to
promise.
for the sanctity of this uh, almost there.
Okay. And when you're ready, I'll the same thing that you did. Just give me like a little bit of time, and I'll say go, and then you can read it.
Okay. I'm just trying to find the coordinates. That's all.
For those who may be watching or listening to anything live, just to let you know, right now we are conducting a remote viewing experiment between the hosts of the podcasts to see if any of us can accomplish this or have a knack for it.
Okay. I have rough coordinates. So it yeah, I have rough coordinates of this. So
Okay. All right. I will let you know when I am ready. Okay.
mhm. coordinates are 55 degrees, 56 minutes, 50.640 seconds north, 3 degrees, 11 minutes, 8.988 seconds west. Once again, that's 55 degrees, 56 minutes, 50.640 seconds north, 3 degrees, 11 minutes, 8.988 seconds west.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So what I got, tell me how wrong this is. Was I was seeing like a gravel road with like high weeds on both sides of it. Um I sensed like some kind of smoke or dust. I felt like there was like a wooden sign or some type of like kind of decaying like wooden thing designating where this is. Um I felt like kind of like a crunchy feeling. Um yeah, that's kind of what I got.
Okay. Um, so that is wrong.
Okay.
Let me share with you, both of you. I just shared it
Sure.
on Google Drive. So the picture that I ended up choosing was actually almost exactly a year ago. It was last Halloween. My girlfriend and I were in Edinburgh, and Halloween night we went on a ghost tour through Edinburgh, a walking tour, and the tour guide took all of us down into these what I would equate them to catacombs almost. They weren't catacombs, they were like these many hundred-year-old storage vaults beneath a famous bridge that spans. It's like a walkway bridge that spans several miles through Edinburgh, and in these catacomb-like structures. Apparently, over the centuries, a lot of homeless people lived down there. There was a lot of death and awful things down there, and there were different occult rituals that were practiced in these vaults, I guess you could call them. And the picture that I have is actually there was I forget who it was, but he was a renowned occultist set up shop down there and engaged in a number of rituals. And I took a picture of the preserved um, ceremony room that he mocked up. It has a lot of robes and pentagrams and chairs and things like that. I shared it with you both on Drive. It's a pretty creepy looking picture.
God, where the hell were you trying to send me, man?
I was trying to pick something that
Damn.
wasn't. I was trying to be as like off the wall as I could. I didn't want to pick anything that would be stereotypical for me. Well, I guess this is kind of stereotypical for me, but not
Right.
not in the sense of like I didn't want to pick a mountain, you know.
Right.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so I was literally just scrolling through my phone. I was like, "What's something that's not a nature picture?" I'm like scrolling. Like, okay, trees, mountains,
Yeah.
lakes, and then like I landed on this. It's like, oh, okay, that works. Like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so that's what I picked.
I would say I had a similar experience to you. Like I felt myself like trying to fight, like just assuming what you were gonna pick.
Exactly. That's part of the difficulty of this.
Yeah, there were certain things that like came to me that just seemed completely out of nowhere, but like yeah, I felt yeah, I think that part's difficult, you know.
Right. And again, for our listeners, this is just a fun little experiment. I don't think any of us really expected to get any major hits on any of these.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for a
It would
job,
be
man.
what we should maybe do is like, if we ever want to try this again, is to get somebody who is completely, unrelated to the person who will be doing the viewing to pick something, so you have no context whatsoever.
Yeah, right.
Mm,
But I think this goes to show potentially some of the issues with these type of experiments.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
I could imagine if you're hired by the CIA during the Cold War to remote view something, you may suspect it's in Russia,
Right. Right. I'm
and
pretty sure McMonagall even said that there was a few times where he was told that the coordinates were in Russia.
yeah, that's something I wanted to bring up is that it seemed like there's a lot of malleability, variability in these
Mhm,
series of experiments where sometimes they were given uh pretty exact descriptions. Sometimes they go in completely blind, like we did,
mhm,
with nothing more than a series of numbers to guide you. But I seem to remember in one of McGonagall's interviews, he was describing how his I don't know what you call them, his handlers, the guys overseeing this, were describing to him like, okay, so uh, in Russia, there's a building, and they vaguely describe the building. In the building on the second floor, there is a locked door. Inside of the locked door, there is a hallway. At the end of the hallway, there is a small room. Inside that small room, there is a table. On the table is an object. Please try to describe that object. I
mhm.
seem to remember him, and it was like literally like that specific, and he would try it there. So there's a great range here, it seems, with remote viewing from like next to no information to quite a bit of information.
right.
Mhm.
So
So I think the next thing we should go into is what people what people's theories are for why this may or may not work or how it's possible, and then our own. And just as because it's a good segue, um, one of my theories for this uh, is that it's related to our ability to intuit things. That when I was listening to people describe how this happens and some of the successes that people have had, I couldn't help but thinking, you know, maybe it's fine that there is some context, and maybe the process isn't so much about trying to pull something out of thin air, but to actually uh manipulate your consciousness in a way that allows you to be more in tune with some of the intuitions that we have that normally are overshadowed by us overthinking things. Um, you know, so like for example, in that situation you were just talking about, like something on a table with very specific setup. Um, Maybe some people have a their processing or whatever part of their brain is responsible for this thing that we call intuition about things is very strong, but normally through the way we think, we kind of bury or second guess ourselves about that kind of thing. Um, a lot of our physiology happens without it being directly in our path of focus and our consciousness, right? Like, you know, we reaction times can be quicker than your ability to actually process what's going on, because of how the body works and how nerves work, right?
Hmm.
So I was couldn't help but thinking, maybe this is allowing people, maybe the practice is allowing people to just dig up that sort of innate intuition about things that has a lot of value that normally gets overthought or second guessed. Um, you guys have any thoughts about that?
No, I think that that's definitely a good thought to have. I mean, if you're really trying to like describe how this works based on like our already like what we already understand, I think that this fits into our understanding of things. Obviously there's more like out there descriptions. I know that McGonagall, um kind of the very very rudimentary and basic description he gave is he explained like tuning forks, right?
Mhm.
You have a tuning fork on one side of a room and the other, and if you hit the one tuning fork, it's possible that through the transference of matter that the other tuning fork would start to resonate at the same
Mhm.
frequency. So that's like a very visual basic description of things, but he argued that everything was tied together, and this gets into, you know, whether or not the term's used properly, quantum entanglement and
Mhm.
that kind of line of thinking. But no, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense
Mhm.
and is very like a very, based in reality as we know it description. I do
Mhm.
think there's a lot of like intuitions and stuff that are happening, like you said, without us consciously realizing and observing them. I mean, that's just how things work. And I think that goes all the way back to just, you know, how we're made and how we survive. And there's these neural pathways that we don't necessarily realize that are firing, in ways that are working to keep us alive. There's a lot of things like breathing and these and other, things that we aren't aware of them, but it's incredibly hard to stop the body from doing for any long amount of time without meeting
Mhm.
some type of resistance. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
And right. And if like for example, if you're fixated on something, like if you are I don't know, making dough or something for a pizza, there could be something going on a TV in the background that you still is the sound waves are still hitting your ears, right? But you aren't consciously like aware that it's going on. So it just goes to show how your the what you are focusing your attention on um can dominate a lot of the sensory information that you are obtaining all the time, you know? Like, the brain is good at filtering out things. Um,
Hmm.
so that was, like, my thought, and that's where I would go to test first if I was trying to, you know, design a science-based test for, um, potential reasons this may have some amount of statistical success, you know? Um, but yeah, like you said, there are plenty of other theories, that like you mentioned quantum entanglement, that one's interesting. That kind of this also ties back into the Mandela effect and all of the people who um feel like they have like a heightened ability to perceive other dimensions and some of these things that are metaphysical but explain them with um physical concepts that we might not fully understand yet. We know that quantum entanglement is a real phenomena that occurs. And, there's like you could definitely make a pretty good hypothesis uh that would go something along the lines of, well, our brains, which we use to process information, are matter, and we know that bits of matter can be in quantum entangled with other bits of matter, right? So maybe there is something that we can focus that kind of entanglement connection on something that is not currently where we are, what we're experiencing, and tap into this this phenomena.
Yeah, it very
Um,
much reminds me of the Schumann resonance as well, right? Like these forces that we're not consciously aware of could potentially be affecting our psyche and our bodies. You
right.
know, it,
Hmm.
it seems like kind of a common theme among a lot of these more fringe theories. This idea.
Hmm.
I mean, I think it just kind of arises out of just not truly understanding how everything works and not having like a theory that just covers everything, along with the complexity of like the human brain. It's a very complex thing. So
Hmm.
to extrapolate and say that these different forces could potentially affect it, I don't think is a wild thought at all.
Yeah,
I would say that there's still going to be fundamental breakthroughs and understandings as we go forward. We are very far from figuring everything out at this point.
Hmm.
absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
we should look at the data, right? And I think that some of the stuff that indicates that there might be something to this is a point that we should not take lightly, and it could very well reveal could start the path that could reveal some of a deeper understanding of how the mind works, and if humans do possess the ability to tap into some sort of sensory information or some other whatever, um that could illuminate our understanding of consciousness or the neurophysiology of our brains. So, yeah, I think this one is really fascinating in that regard. And I think it's definitely worth considering. And I think there is probably something to it. Whether or not it is something that is as wild as something metaphysical or not, I'm not sure. But we should definitely continue to uh, you know, while it may seem crazy to some people, we should not shoot it down right away, and we should consider it holy. And if there is evidence that something is going on, and it seems like that might be the case, we should definitely continue to explore it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think also too, just while doing the experiment myself, I think there's an element that's similar to, like psychic readings or cold reading. I don't know if you guys have read about that much.
Mhm.
And this is a very, like skeptical opinion of remote viewing. Um, just to make it clear, I do believe that there is potentially something here, right? And whether that's the intuitive factor that Brandon's talking about or something more metaphysical, I'm not sure. But I can't help but wonder if, just due to the vagueness of some of these terms and words that people use when actually doing a remote viewing. I've watched some where, some guy was like, oh, well, I see water. It's like, okay, well, water's like extremely common on Earth, right?
Right.
It's like
So
70% of the
it's like
planet.
70% of the planet. So he's like, I see water, I see a parallel structure, I see something that's, semi-permanent. And it's like nearly everything's semi-permanent. Okay.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? That's just like a throwaway term, right?
Right. And these
And
terms are like vague enough where you can apply, like you can look at, semi-permanent. You can look at a bridge, you can look at a rock, you could look at a field
right.
of grass, and you could apply that meaning of semi-permanent to all of them, right?
Exactly. And you see
Hmm.
this and this is, you know, I don't claim to know everything once again, but
Mhm.
when I watch like psychics, like if you watch a YouTube video of a psychic or you've ever seen one, do the spiel out in public, it's like, oh, did somebody die in your family recently? It's like, well, chances are probably, you know,
Right.
or they'll be like, no, it wasn't. They'll be like, no, it wasn't a family member, but it was a close friend. They're like, yeah, okay, it's so close that it was like a family member, and they're like, yeah, that's right, yeah, my friend Jenny, and it's like. And it's like,
Hmm.
oh, she always wore this red coat, didn't she? And she's like, yeah, she did have a red coat. And it's like, you're kind
Yeah.
of, there's so much vagueness in this
Mhm.
that there's such a confirmation bias from the part of the person who you're doing the reading or viewing for, that it's like, to actually derive meaningful information,
Mhm.
just
You know,
yeah.
I saw a funny meme one time years ago. I saved it. I don't have it on me right now, but it was an opened fortune cookie,
Uh-huh.
and the fortune said, "You will continue to interpret vague statements as uniquely meaningful."
Yeah, exactly. And I think as human beings, that's gotten us pretty far, right?
Yeah.
Like interpreting things and like filling in the blanks. It seems kind of necessary to like keep surviving, right? You're often
Mhm.
in life you're not presented with a full set of facts. You have to make interpretations and assumptions about things almost every minute of your life. So,
Mhm.
Right.
for us to see these patterns in things that are seemingly random is not crazy to think at all. And I don't want to be
Yeah.
completely skeptical, because it does seem, if you look at some of the scientific literature, that there is potentially something there. But I just would like caution people from just like blindly accepting some of these readings and things like that.
Right.
Yeah,
We look to apply meaning to any information that comes across us, right? It's just
Right.
human tendency. And, I mean, but that also may be like part of why this works is that, it's giving people kind of a novel idea or allowing them to use association with these vague terms to kind of help flesh out what they're looking for or, you know, apply meaning to it that can help them actually solve an unknown that they were not thinking about, right? Like they could be, if someone says like, "Oh, it's like there's a linear structure or whatever," your brain starts trying to like think of all the linear structures, and that might help you in the like context of like something like espionage or whatever. It might narrow down the options of what you're looking for, and that could be beneficial, right? Like
Right. And
whether like mhm.
yeah, to bring it full circle, is this not what large language models and AI do?
Ooh.
Right?
Yeah,
I
I
Mm.
mean,
guess you're right. Yeah.
they're extremely good guessers, and that's what you're kind of hitting at here, I think.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I also wanted to follow up on the point you made, Alex, about confirmation bias,
Hmm.
because uh, the old statement, "A broken clock's right twice a day." For the amount of times that remote viewers have complete misses versus hits, you I think there may be people who buy into this, who hand wave away all the misses and just
Mm.
focus on the hits, where it could have just been sheer dumb luck mixed with like some suggestibility, that got them to a correct conclusion. Whereas you need to account for all of the times where the results did not bring anything fruitful at all,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
so
every
I
time, like, and that's the thing too that can make this seem like a lot more solid than it is every time someone does get a hit, right? That's what everyone talks about, and that's when you make a YouTube video, and so it kind of can make it seem maybe like it's a lot more um solid than it actually is, right? Because you
yeah,
don't, you know,
yeah,
yeah.
earlier before the podcast, Alex and I were talking briefly about manifestation. And I don't want to get too deeply into it, but he and I were both exchanging stories of times where we experienced what felt like something in our lives that manifested out of like a desire for that thing to happen.
Mhm.
And we're emotional beings, right? So we our emotions very often control us. So it can feel very much like, oh, like this thing I wanted suddenly popped into reality, like I manifested it. And it feels from our first person perspective compelling.
Mhm.
But then you have to step back a bit and think of all the times you wanted a certain outcome in your life and that did not occur. And
Mhm.
I would argue that those moments probably outweigh the moments where something seemingly mystically just went your way, so to speak.
Right, and I think
So,
there's a parallel here, with at least what, my brain goes to as a theory for something like manifestation, is that, you know, I imagine that there's a similar mechanism where, if you are trying to manifest something, if you go through the practice, you are thinking more about that thing. You are putting yourself in positions or doing things, whether you are doing it consciously or not, that will make it more likely for that thing to occur, you know?
mhm,
So I think that, there even with manifestation, I think that it probably is not a completely it's probably a worthwhile practice a lot of times because you're then putting yourself in a position where you're going to consciously be thinking about that or subconsciously too, and you will more likely find yourself in patterns of habit or in situations where that thing that you are looking for is more likely to occur, or be achieved. Um, so I think that even though the practice might, whether or not it has some sort of like metaphysical basis, can still net um, like positive change or good results because of the fact that you practicing it is putting yourself in a position that is allowing you to more likely accomplish that thing or gain that thing. I think it's very similar to what's happening here. At least, that's what my gut says about it.
mhm,
Yeah. Another
mhm,
thought that I had too is like obviously you have to be very careful in how you design these experiments, right?
Hmm.
And this is kind of a theory I was playing with, and obviously this wouldn't apply to all experiments because they've all probably been designed slightly differently and how they're actually operated. But my thinking was these people who supposedly have this extrasensory perception, the ability to remote view, supposedly have high emotional intelligence, right? So if you were remote viewing something and the person you're remote viewing for, you're describing to them what you saw, and you're starting to describe things much like the psychic that I described a few minutes ago, you might pick up on these subtle reactions, whether they're, like physiological reactions this person's having, a tilt of the head, a recoil, a clenched fist. These are more extreme examples, perspiration, all of these things, and be able to pick up on these very small, subtle cues that allow you to then, go down that road of, okay, well, and I don't think it would be this conscious, but go down the road of, oh, well, that person responded in this way to when I said that information. And so I want to either keep going down that road or not. based on that very subtle, reaction. And to think that people with high emotional intelligence would be better at picking up on these subtle things, I think would make a lot of sense. I think that's exactly what emotional intelligence probably is. So I just thought, while designing these experiments, it's very important to kind of remove that subtle, almost unconscious, subconscious confirmation from happening between the viewer and the person interpreting the results.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mm-hmm. So, if we move forward with let's humor the assumption for a moment that this is real, that remote viewing is an actual real phenomenon and can be employed. What are the ramifications of that? What does that mean for our world? What does that mean for uh, acts of like espionage? What does that mean on an individual level? People being able to almost like metaphysically spy on others. It creates a pretty eerie. It presents a very eerie conception of the world if this is true.
Mm-hmm. I mean, immediately I think of the fact that, in a way, we kind of have this ability now with the internet, right? Like, in a very real sense, it's very possible to view something uh, that is not within your immediate sensory data. Um, and
Hmm.
like I think a lot of the issues that you have with that in the context of the internet would happen if this was the case, if you could do it in your mind. Obviously this is like another level where, I mean, you know, you would almost you'd be verging on like deity like levels of power, right? You could
Sure.
extend your lifespan by avoiding potential uh issues in the future. You could use it to embellish your personal wealth. Um and it would, if this was a real thing, the people who are the best at it, would be beneficiaries a lot more than everyone else. And, you would see them having a lot more control over their lives. Um, yeah. I don't know what I think that, that would have a pretty detrimental effect on society. Um, because it's only a matter of time, right? If it's real that someone who has malintentions for humans in general, or just apathy for the well-being of others, would utilize this power to uh, help and promote themselves in kind of scary ways, right? It's if you have this power, you can pretty much, you could rise to any position of power in societal structures that you want, right?
Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah.
supposedly Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are really into remote viewing, from what I've heard. Kidding,
Really?
kidding.
Very, very
No,
high
I'm
emotional
kidding.
intelligence
I'm
on
kidding.
those
Yeah.
guys.
How do they
See,
get
the
all this
crazy thing is
money?
I wasn't even like shocked when you said it.
I
I
know,
was just like, oh,
honestly.
okay, that figures.
But yeah, so I agree with what Brandon's saying. I think the thing is like so assuming that it's real, the accuracy of it doesn't leave enough confidence for me for it to be something that I would act upon. Like
Mhm,
obviously if you're using it in like a military circumstance, like having information that isn't 100% correct may still be beneficial because it's just something else that you can kind of fit into the equation of that you're using on how to act in the future, and how to do your mission or whatever that is. It may just help you kind of generate additional parameters that may pop up. But in like normal life, if the accuracy's, you know, pretty low, which it seems to be relatively low, right? Like we're talking a
mhm.
percent or two sometimes, that we get away from, normal statistical outcomes. It just it seems like it just isn't enough to really like wildly change your life,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
something that you would want to sink a lot of confidence or time into acting upon.
Mhm. But that would also imply that, you know, even if it's not perfect, it could probably get better because that would imply that there's some mechanism allowing it, right? And even if, that's not possible, it would still be worth, you know, fully pursuing an understanding of because it would seem to imply that there is something you can take advantage of there, right?
Right. And do we do to really put on the tinfoil hat here? Did the CIA declassify this stuff because they actually figured out how it works and they want everybody to think that it's bullshit and they don't know how it
Mm,
works? Maybe they figured it out and they're like, we'll declassify everything saying we don't know how it works, because they
Mm.
right.
cracked the code, right?
What was that
Right.
term for when they do that? We talked about it in
Limited
the UFO.
hangout.
Yep. A
Yeah,
limited
limited
hangout.
hangout.
Yeah. I mean, to really put the tinfoil hat on, I mean, you could see that's I think it's a thought to have.
Totally.
Uh,
Yeah. No, I think you're totally right.
Yeah, I mean,
You could
and who's to
also
say they're not still practicing it, right? Like, yeah, they can say they haven't, but like I
Mhm.
said earlier, like it's like a black box. How the hell would you know?
Right. And I mean the stakes are high, and if it does give you even a couple percent more, you know, in terms of like accuracy for solving things or an some sort of advantage over, your adversaries, it I don't even think I would blame them for using it, right?
no, not at
Like
all.
yeah, totally. They should definitely be using it. Um yeah, it's and they could also have put that information out there to scout, right? Like make the awareness more broad, and then people who might have a more intuitive uh, knack for this or a natural talent for it might like pursue it or be aware of it where they might not otherwise, and could be a great benefit to the espionage infrastructure in the U.S.
And in a way, this podcast has become a mouthpiece of the government.
Always has been.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, so what do we think? What do we think here? Why do we think the CIA was seemingly so fixated on it for decades?
it just
Uh,
it
do you,
Yeah.
well, I was just gonna say, do we think it was? I brought this idea up earlier before the podcast. Do you think it was just a situation of the CIA having endless chunks of money at their disposal and just throwing it at whatever, whatever
Mm,
just outlandish things because they can, or
well,
what do we think? Did they
so
discover something?
obviously they have a big budget, right? Like maybe an
Hmm.
unlimited budget. But you got to understand in the context of history a little bit. We this is during Cold War times, right?
Hmm.
And we as a country, the CIA hears that Russia is working on this, right?
Mhm.
So if Russia is putting the time into studying this, you better bet your bottom dollar that we're going to too, in case it does actually show something. We can't let them get 10 years advanced on this and us just start looking into it and not ever be able to catch up to them. This was a time where tensions in the world were extremely high, and anything like this that you would hear, you would immediately start investigating.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point, actually.
Right.
And-
And, also, like I mentioned, right, even if it gives you the slightest of advantage, when the stakes are as high as something like espionage and, global war and politics, I don't fault anyone for pursuing every possible, uh,
Mm-hmm.
venture despite how wild it may seem, if it can net you even a fraction of an advantage, or higher efficiency or better target acquisition or whatever, you know. Um, and honestly, I mean, you think about something like this, is it really that high of a cost to study, right? Like,
Yeah, not
it's
really.
yeah, you just get like
w-
some
we had
people
the
in the
numbers on
room.
their budget, right?
Yeah, they said like, yeah, the guy in one of the interviews was bragging. He's like, it was millions of dollars. He's like more than 1 million, and that's like nothing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's literally nothing for them.
Mhm. So, if you can spend a few million of, from a budget of what, trillions, um, that maybe there's something there, even if the likelihood of there's something being there is low, why not? I think it totally makes sense,
Yeah. And
Yeah.
just
because
to
we
go
don't know. We don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And just to go back to the Cold War thing, I was definitely reading some people claimed that this information was ceded to America as a Russian disinformation campaign in order to get the CIA to waste its time and money on.
Ah, wow.
Interesting.
Propaganda. That's so
Yeah.
interesting. Mind wars.
Yeah.
Literally.
I bet
Yeah.
I'm sure that happens a lot, right?
Oh, I'm sure it
It
does.
totally valid strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. So do we buy into the validity of claims of fellows like McMonagall? Do we think that he actually has extrasensory abilities, or do we think he's something more of a guy who enjoys the limelight, or is it somewhere in between? I don't know.
He's a hard one because, I mean, like we mentioned, he had definitely worked in these arenas, right? And it seems like if that's not what he was doing, they would surely say, right? Or maybe not. I don't know. Um, I think that maybe, you know, I think that maybe whether it's real or not, or whether that it's actually something metaphysical going on, he's probably has a knack for whatever it is, intuition or whatever. To the extent that he claims, I'm skeptical. Think he even says that it's possible to change the past using this, which I was like, I don't understand how that works at all, right? You're just
Yeah.
viewing. It's not like you're there, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, which statements like that make me a little bit skeptical. Also, he talks a lot about like, dropping your ego and having no ego, but I think the guy definitely has an ego. Maybe he's just good
Yeah.
at suppressing it, but when you listen to him, he is definitely uh he definitely feels tied up in his in the in
In its
people's
image.
perception of his image. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Dare I say he sort of comes off a little braggadocious to me.
Right. Right.
Um, because he was. I mean that one podcast I listened to on what's the guy's name? Sean Ryan, is that his
Yeah.
podcast?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was a long one. That was like 6 hours. I did not listen to the whole thing. I listened to bits of it. I listened to like the first hour and a half, and yeah, his stories were interesting, certainly, but there's an element where it comes off kind of braggy to me. How he's always like the insubordinate guy, and he always, even though he was insubordinate, like his actions were deemed like fantastic in some regard, or positive for the government or the military, and so he continues to rise the ranks while being this bit of an outlaw kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
He definitely, it comes off to me a little uh like he's full of himself a bit, but
Yeah.
and again, to be fair, like he was there for all that stuff, so maybe he has good grounds to be a little full of himself, but you
Right.
know what I mean? Like he was there, he was involved in all of it. He has quite an illustrious career. There's no denying it.
Did any of you hear him say anything about his theories about why it works?
I mean, the only thing I didn't get too deep into it, but the
Mhm.
only thing was like I said before, like everything's connected. This he didn't. I don't know that he used the words quantum entanglement, but
Mhm.
just like I said with the pitchfork description, like everything is connected.
Mm.
I don't know.
Right.
It's not a great description. Did you come across anything?
No, not really. I was waiting for it.
Yeah.
Because I like that's the thing. I feel like with these guys, you either need to have an explanation for how it works, or be like, have the honesty to be like, I really can't explain why it works. To me, that comes across as a lot more honest if you are like, look, I just sit there and I clear my mind and these things pop into my head and I don't know how the fuck it works.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
That was very much a problem with the Preston Nichols story for me. Was there was just
Right.
so many gaps in understanding that it becomes very easy to come up with these extravagant reasons for why things work because they're not provable currently.
Right.
And the language they use is very like loaded and potentially like pseudo physical, pseudo scientific, kind of language.
Right. Right. So, I'm pretty skeptical of McMonagall. Um, but like I said, there may very well be something to this that is not connected at all to, something wild, some wild explanation. It may
Yeah,
just be that, people are more in tune with their natural intuition, and some people might have better natural intuition than others. Or, are better at using context to formulate theories about things or whatever.
Yeah, I
And,
think that that's
mm,
so
absolutely true, right?
mhm, right.
so in this one CIA document that was declassified and released, they I'll just read this like two or three sentences here. So the assertion here is that somewhere, perhaps in the unconscious mind, there exists what we will label the matrix. The matrix knows no boundaries and has no limitations. It contains all information about all things. It could be thought of as omnipotent, or you could think of it as a database, etc. So I guess, and I'm assuming here that McMonagall would subscribe to this definition. That somehow, when your subconscious mind comes forward at the forefront, it's in touch with this quote unquote matrix.
Right.
So
It's like
like
the Hall
everything
of
is interconnected.
Records kind of thing, or like what is it called?
Yeah.
How do you say it? You'll know how to say it. The Akashic
What?
Records.
The
Have you heard this?
Akashic records. Yes, I know of
Yeah,
this. What is?
I think I'm butchering how you say that, but yeah, it's like the Hall of Records. Like all of this data is stored within everything, and it's like I don't know. That just doesn't. It might be true,
Unless
but
we're in a simulation.
you're right. Then it's just in the server room outside, But like, yeah, these descriptions just leave so much to be desired.
Mhm.
I can
Mhm.
easily say like, oh, the universe is like a black box, and inside the black box there's this smoke, and everything's contained within the smoke, and it's like that. Literally, that's what he just read to us.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just with
Literally,
different words. Like,
totally. The effect is the same, right?
yeah,
It's all very vague. It's
yeah,
kind of it's a little babbly, isn't it?
yeah,
Because there's
Right.
nothing concrete there.
Mhm.
right.
But, just to
So,
play, like, you know, devil's advocate here, maybe it's just that, they experience it, it's real, but they just are trying to apply reasoning to it based on what they know about the universe as we know it now. And maybe that, people just don't have the understanding to really describe what is actually going on and are just doing their best to, apply some
Yeah,
what their intuition to it
sure,
or whatever,
sure. I mean, we could be, and certainly we are missing some key pieces of the puzzle of life, right? So,
Right.
yeah, and maybe that could account for this, and we just utterly don't have it yet.
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. So,
Fascinating stuff, though. Fascinating stuff.
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, there does seem to be something there, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely something I think we should not totally write off as a society. It's
Right.
probably merits more study. I mean, in general, right? Like if it's a phenomenon that occurs, if we continue our scientific discovery of the physical universe, at some point we'll come across the mechanism, right?
Yeah, there's been
Um,
many
Mm-hmm.
of things that we have utilized, like think like fire, for instance, that we were able to utilize before we truly understand the fundamental, ways that it worked. So
right.
that's typically
Yeah,
how things
that's
are.
true.
You figure out some strange property before you figure out how it works. So I think I
Right.
would not be surprised if that was what was happening here.
and even in the scientific world, something like fire is a good example for this. Like it was like the top level chemists and the people who are at the forefront of research in chemistry at the time had this idea that fire was this thing called phlogiston. And it was like that was the accepted scientific theory. And people used that term and used that idea for scientific research for a long time before we actually understood what was going on. And people would have just believed that that is what it is, and that was like scientists who were saying this, right?
Mhm.
So, you do have to remember that we are still learning so much, and it's always healthy to, despite how much, and I'm talking to myself here too. Despite how much you think you know about the makeup and the workings of what we experience as reality, it is not written in stone, and we still have so much to understand, you know, and
Mhm.
things can change, and we can discover new things, that completely defy our current understanding of how things work.
Mhm.
This might be one of those cases. Probably
Yeah.
not, though.
Mm.
All right. Anything else we need to cover?
No, I think we did a pretty good job covering majority of things here.
Oh, one thing, just a brief ending note that for anyone who's interested, I don't think we mentioned this earlier. There is a movie that was made surrounding this subject. I believe it came out in 2009. It's called The Men Who Stare at Goats, starring George Clooney. Um, it's been many years since I've seen it, but I do recall enjoying it quite a bit when I saw it many, many moons ago. So, for anyone listening who would like an entertaining film on this subject, Men Who Stare at Goats, check it out. I'm not sponsored.
But we're open to it.
Yeah, here we are.
We're
Hit me up,
George
George.
Clooney, yeah, hit me up.
oh, hold on. I'm remote viewing him right now. He's listening to this in the future. He's shaking his head. Oh God, he's deleting it. Oh God. Okay, yeah.
Don't
We're out
watch
of.
the movie then. Never mind.
uh, well, to all of our listeners, past, present, and future, thank you very much for tuning in. We hope our discussion has been worth your time, and we hope you will join us for the next one.